Well, here we are. After 13 and a half years, Alan Wake 2, the sequel a lot of people have been waiting for, is finally here. I was provided a review code for the game earlier this week, so many thanks to Epic Games for providing me with a copy. However, for that reason, this is a review in progress. I've played around 10 or so hours of the game, and I'd say I'm roughly halfway through, though I have been taking my time and exploring rather than rushing through the main narrative. But I've played enough to, I think, at least talk about the crux of how it all works. I should note the footage you're seeing on screen will only be of the first few missions of both Saga's and Alan's story, and I won't be providing any big spoilers, just the general overview and thoughts of the story so far. I'll be sure to have a full review up either over the weekend or very early next week, but until then, what do I, as someone who has been a pretty big fan of the first game since its release, think of Alan Wake 2? It's pretty darn great, but there's some issues, but we'll get into all of that. So, how about we just get right into it? Let's start from the top. So you'll be playing as Saga Allenson to begin with, an FBI agent who comes to Bright Falls after various cult murders over the years have taken place. She's joined by her broody, but lovable, partner in crime, Alex Casey, and upon investigating the latest murder scene, they encounter a manuscript page that talks about their investigation. That very moment where they're looking at the page, in fact. It's here that they start to realise something odd is occurring, as more and more pages start to surface, as well as creepy cultists covered in shadows beginning to attack them. That's probably all I can give away without going into major spoilers, but what I will say is that I really like Saga's and Casey's work relationship here. They just know how to push each other's buttons in the right way, and they make me want to learn more about their lives outside of Bright Falls. There's absolutely a lot of mystery surrounding Saga's side of the story, and as you progress, you start to doubt those questions you initially raised with yourself. That said, there's nothing in her story that, for me at least, and for the moment, has absolutely grabbed me. It's a slow burn that wants to set up its pieces over time in the hope of a big payoff, so I guess I'll see where the later missions take me. When I say it's a slow burn, I do mean that. It takes a while for things to really get going, especially if you're, like me, exploring the environment. The first game really wanted you to explore its little nooks and crannies whilst on a linear path, whilst this game is more open area based, where you'll return to various locations across the game, and whilst you might find, say, a locked box early on, you might not be able to unlock it until you obtain the right tool for it later. This is generally fine for the most part, but there are a couple of areas of the game where it does feel like the solution is more simple than the game lets on. But that's only because it's giving you the tool for other similar scenarios later on, so I can somewhat forgive it for that. But as I said, the game wants you to explore, and there is a lot to find if you take your time, with some interesting world building documents, some neat little references to the Remedy Connected universe as a whole, and even some unique mini puzzles. Though a lot of what you'll be on the lookout for is locked boxes which contain the goods for your survival. But what about the main crux of the gameplay? Well, when Remedy said this game would have far less combat than the first game, they weren't kidding. A lot of the time will be spent exploring, as I've stated, and you'll eventually come across some of the taken cultists, where, similar to the first game, you need to burn away the darkness in order to do high damage to them. When I would fight an enemy though, it would be quite intense, as they can get really in your face if you're not careful, and they can actually hit pretty hard, at least on normal difficulty, which I am currently playing this game on. They're a very interesting challenge, if sometimes a little finicky when it comes to trying to dodge their attacks or even trying to use an item whilst they're attacking you. In some situations though, if you don't feel like fighting them, you can just try to bypass them altogether. They're not forever stalking you like in the first game. One reason you might bypass them is that ammo is so very limited. At least it was for me to start off with. Though as I progressed more with Saga, I began to figure out the core gameplay loop on how to conserve your items. Speaking of, whilst in the first game you only had a few items like flares and flashbangs to use, this time you have a whole inventory of items to manage. You'll need to choose what ammo or medical supplies to keep on your person, as this time you don't heal just with light sources. Safe havens will still mildly heal you, but only to take you out of a critical state. If you want to get to full health, you'll need to utilise pads, painkillers and medpacks, which is fine. It's a fine mechanic. I'm not going to complain about that. It's not until a few hours in that you might start needing to store your items away in a shoebox, but if you're a player who is careless with ammo and items, you could be in a lot of trouble later down the line. At any time during Saga's portion of the game, you can switch to her mind place, which is a room that allows her to deduct her investigations as well as look back on previous collectibles and upgrade her weapons. I will say though, the entire time I've played as Saga, I've only really upgraded her weapons a few times, as you need to find manuscript fragments in lunchboxes you'll find around the area, so trust me again when I say the game wants you to explore. As for her caseboard, this leaves me kind of conflicted, because whilst I'm sure for some people it will be nice to piece things out bit by bit to solve the mystery, for me it just kind of feels like a means to an end, as you're placing pictures and documents on the board until something eventually clicks into place. Sometimes this is required to progress the story, whilst other times it's just to help fill the board out to understand some character motives. It's also a way to help show you some of the collectibles you've found so far, but unless there's something more to the collectibles on the board later down the line, it doesn't really help that you have to manually slot the ones you have found on the board. Don't get me wrong, I can absolutely see people gelling with this mechanic, as it'll feel like one of those sticker books you'd get where you'd insert a sticker in a window, but for me it personally feels a little tedious and time consuming, but maybe as I play the game more, I'll come to enjoy this aspect. There is, however, a great sense of atmosphere as you play. Despite being more open than the first game, certain locations will somehow make you feel claustrophobic, which is exactly what the game should be doing anyway. Compared to the first game where you had this level of suspense as you progressed, things are a lot more slowed down and, dare I say it, calmer in some areas? It also feels strange in that, as I explore Bright Falls, it doesn't feel like the same place I left it all those years ago, but then 13 years have passed since. It's also a pretty gruesome game, but not horrendously so. It strikes a good balance in that aspect where it shows just enough gore to not bother most squeamish players. Whilst the game is survival horror in hand, on its sleeve there's a lot of charm to be had as you encounter some of the local populace of Bright Falls and Watery, with some great performances from the cast and some fun little media-based collectibles to look out for. Some of the music, especially the ones that play at the end of chapters, are absolutely amazing songs, and some of these songs will definitely be on a lot of players' playlists, including mine. Now I'm sure you've got this far in the video and are wondering, what about Alan's side of the story? What's he up to? Because of course it is called Alan Wake 2 after all. So, Alan has been trapped in the dark place for 13 years, trying as he might to write his way out, since, as explained in the first game, works of fiction written in or around the dark place hold the power to affect reality and the dark place itself. However, so far he's had no real luck. After some encounters with a very charming talk show host, Alan is sent out into the dark place as he tries to write a new story to finally escape. Along the way he is haunted by his past, as the environment around him is almost mocking him as well as warning him of what might lie ahead. He's not alone though, as he encounters visions of Alex Casey, the detective from his crime novels from more than a decade ago. So yes, as you may have noticed, there is an Alex Casey in the real world and an Alex Casey in the dark place. If I were to say out of Saga's and Alan's story which I prefer, it would absolutely be Alan's. His side of the game feels somewhat more polished, and whilst Saga's atmosphere has a sense of eeriness in the air, Alan's side has that real sense of dread most survival horrors give you, but in a good way where you always feel you need to keep on your toes as the shadows fade in and out of existence, mostly doing you no harm, but any one of them could start attacking you at any moment. Whilst Saga has essentially 3 mini-hubs to explore, Alan has one large hub that breaks off into different sections. As he progresses, he'll need to manipulate the environment, which he can do in one of two ways. The first is with the Angel Lamp, which allows Alan to carry a light source from one area to another, where absorbing or illuminating an area may drastically change what's there. This isn't just used as a simple means of progression, but in some instances you need to use the light in little puzzles, where you'll come across pathways, and you need to use the light at the right time, in the right spot, in order to progress. It's an intriguing little mechanic, and it only makes me want to see what secrets are out there hiding in the dark place using this. The other environmental changing aspect is the writer's board, where along your journey you'll find plot points, as in certain areas you can use these plot points to change the story. What I love about this is that whilst there might be one true solution, if you have a plot point you can use it in an area even if it doesn't make sense, and it helps to expand the narrative and even sometimes help you explore other inaccessible areas. This mechanic is simple but far more effective than Saga's caseboard, where this actually feels like it gives you a good sense of experimentation, whilst Saga's board feels more like trial and error in fitting the pieces. Alan will also utilise similar tools to Saga, though both have some differences in weapons. For example, Saga starts off with your standard 12-bullet pistol, whilst Alan starts with a 6-bullet revolver. He too can upgrade his weapons, though this is done through words of power, where throughout the environment you'll encounter spirals found via your flashlight that relate to a certain word you can upgrade. This could be for upgrading your weapons or health, or even general luck-based mechanics. The selection is however limited because you only get to choose an upgrade based on the word you find, rather than being able to choose an upgrade from any word, and so your mileage may vary on which directions you go first in the dark place and which words you might find. Generally though, whilst these are nice to have, they don't drastically affect the gameplay, at least it hasn't felt like it at the point I'm at. The same could be said for the charms you find on Saga's side. They're neat to have, but they haven't felt entirely useful except for maybe one charm that helped me in a bind. Now, I'm sure you're probably keen to know how this game runs exactly. Well, if you haven't noticed by the footage, I'm playing on the PlayStation 5 version. It comes with both a quality and performance mode, with quality being higher textures at 30 FPS and performance targeting 60 FPS, though it's not a solid 60. But if you play on performance, you'll barely notice any stutters. And it's how I'm currently playing the game. Whilst this game does look really gorgeous in most areas, especially in the dark place, I do note that in lighter areas things can get quite grainy on screen. It has nothing to do with the film grain option in the menus, so that may bother you if you're a stickler for that kind of thing. But for the most part, the game looks really great. I have encountered a few bugs, though I fully expect these to be squashed in future patches. Sometimes when I was on the caseboard, it wouldn't let me quit out of it, nor the mine place, so I had to reload a save, so make sure you're saving often. However, most of what I encountered were minor graphical glitches that, at least for me, didn't hinder my enjoyment. So that's all I have to say on the game right now, but the main thing is that the more I play, the more I want to keep playing as it sucks you in with its mystery and atmosphere. While I do feel I'm halfway through, I feel like I've barely scratched the surface on what could be found across Bright Falls, Watery and the Dark Place. If I had to score it now, I'd give it an 8 out of 10, as it's absolutely an engaging story that will keep you guessing on what the hell is going on, with some fun combat, even if it's a little dry on that front, and interesting game mechanics. As mentioned, I will be doing a full review once I've fully completed the game early next week, so be sure to subscribe for when that comes out. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy your journey back into the dark when the game finally releases tomorrow on the 27th of October 2023. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.